Welcome to Blender Game Master, where beginners become pros. Today we're going over part 2 of the Intro to Python, and today I have Britta Hooter with me. Say hello.
Hello.
She's going to be serving as the student who doesn't know anything about Python or programming or even Blender, because she doesn't. So we're going to start by going straight into the Python interpreter. And we're going to be looking at lists. Lists are a collection of variables. So variables like x equals 10. And so if we look at x, we see there's a 10 that's stored inside of x. We can also make x contain, and with square brackets, a series of items. And they don't have to be numbers. It could be any type of variable, any type of data type within Python. So now x has these 3 variables, 1, 2, and 6 within it. And if we use the type function, if I typed myself, we'll see that it's a typed list. Okay, there are a number of ways you can get data into lists. The easiest, obviously, is to type it like we just did. But if you have a large collection of numbers that you need, then we're going to use a function called the range function. The range function has an initial variable, a starting point. It has an ending point, and it has a step function, which is optional. You don't have to have the step function. So if we do this, it'll give us a list containing all of those numbers. We can take that list and put it into x like this. This time I'm just going to start at 0, I'm going to go to 10, and we're going to it defaults to 1, a step of 1. So now x has all the numbers 0 to 9. And you notice that we're starting at 0, and we're not going to 10, but we actually have 10 digits. So 0 through 9 is 10 digits. So don't get confused and think it's going to have 10 in your list, because it won't, unless you put 11 there. Or you start at 1, of course, then it would. Okay, so now we have a for statement, and the for statement has a variable. We'll just call it y, and it steps through a list. And so we'll use x as our list. So for y in x. And then we have a colon. And then after the colon and indented, so we know it's part of the for function, we have all the rest of the actions that need to happen within the for loop. So in this case, we're going to print y. And if I hit enter one more time, it'll run the program. And you can see that it's printing all of the elements within the list one by one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what's a for loop and a for function?
Well, the function is a command in Python that tells the computer to go step by step through the list. And so first it sets y equal to the first element, which is 0, and then it prints it. You can see here it did that. Then it goes back up here, and it checks to see, are we at the end of the list? No. If we're not at the end of the list, then it goes to the next element here, 1. And then it prints 1. And then so this is a loop, because it's going around this little loop here, back and forth, until it gets to the end. Okay, the next thing we're going to be looking at is called the if statement. And the if statement is a command that's in pretty much every computer language, and it's used to make decisions. So in this case, we have the variable a equal to 1. We're going to go if a is equal to 2, print a. Else if a is equal to 1, print a. Else, print a. Now obviously we're always printing a, which isn't very useful, but it's just an example. And when we run this program, we see that 1 is printed, because in this case the else if was true, and so it printed a. These were false, and so they weren't executed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. The if statement can also not just do equals, you can also do greater than, or less than, or greater than and equal to, or greater than and less than, or sorry, greater than and equal to, and a few other things. If you'd like to learn more about Python, you should definitely go to the Python documentation page, and here you'll see they're giving a much more sane example where a person has entered x is equal to int, which is an integer, a whole number from not a 0.6 or whatever, and raw input takes input from the keyboard, and it also prints up a message. So the user will see a message, please enter an integer. And here you can see the message, they've run the program, and they typed in 42. So now x contains 42. If x is smaller than 0, then set x equal to 0 and print negative change to 0. Else if x is equal to 0, print 0. Else if x is equal to 1, print single, as in single digit. I don't know why they chose that, but that's what they did. And else, in every other case, print more. And when this is run, it prints more, because obviously 42, the input, was more. It was x was in this case not smaller than 0, it wasn't equal to 0, it wasn't equal to 1, so it comes to the else statement, and it's thus executes this statement. Is that clear?
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay, good. There's another web page here that I found called PyMove 3D. It's not finished, and it seems to have been translated from German as best I can tell, and there's no author. I was hoping to help him out and correct some of his mistakes. But nonetheless, it's a really good web page, and it has a lot of good information, and it's directed at Blender. And here are the types of numbers that are within Python, types of variables. These are the sequence types, and here you see list as a sequence. There's also dictionaries and sets. So, but we're only going to be really worried about lists, and tuple is like a list except for the order can't be changed. It's frozen. So, now I'm going to start up Blender, and we're going to be starting Blender from the command line. And the reason we're doing this is because when you run Python scripts in Blender, it gives your error messages back here on the console, on the command line. So to demonstrate this, I'll just put an error in here first of all. And now if I press Alt-P, it runs it, and it says Python script fail, look in cursor window for now. And so if we go down here with the window, you get this really rather obtuse looking error message. And it's telling you that as it went through its program, it found that in line 9, in my first Python blend text, line 9, there's a name error. This is not defined. And I know this is really hard to read. Basically just look for the place where it says 9 and look for something that looks like your code. And I'm sorry I don't have a better way to explain that, but does that make sense to you?
We just gotta look for the arrow, where it says name arrow, and you just
error, yeah.
You just look for the arrow, and then it tells you what arrow it is, and then you get rid of it.
Yeah, that's basically the idea. So we go back to our program, we see up here, oh, this is obviously not right, and this is obviously the line 9 with a problem, and we can fix it. So I'm going to erase this because I've run this program many times. So what this program does when you run it is it creates these very nice colored spheres. And how it does it is the important point. first what we do is we load in a bunch of pre-made commands from Blender, and that's called BPY. Then from the random module we import uniform. Uniform is the random command that I went over on the last time. It just picks a random number between the first and second point that you give it. And I'm also importing some math functions from the math module, the math library, sine, cosine, and radians. So here we're going to set the variable scale to 1.2. And in this line here, we're creating a new material for Blender. And this material is called blue. When it's created, it creates it down here actually, which is, you know, your what mode do we call this? The 3D solid mode. And it's not actually using the cycles view. Oh, it doesn't actually put any data in there. And then we're going to set the viewpoint color here using red, green, and blue. It's the diffuse colors you can see. And also we're turning on, we're setting use nodes to true. That'll cause it to use cycles nodes. We then create a diffuse node, and we save that. The address, the location that the diffuse node is put in the computer. The diffuse node has a bunch of functions. And in this case, one of them is called input, and we give it what we want to input. And we're going to be inputting color, which is here, the color. We can also, easier to read in red, we can input the color, we can input the roughness. Those are the two inputs. We also have an input called name and label in a node, in this particular node. So here we're setting the color, and it's very important to notice that it's red, green, blue, and alpha. This one here doesn't need an alpha, this one does. If you don't give it an alpha, you'll get an error because it'll say you've given it 3 values for a tuplet and not 4. Roughness just needs a value. We're going to put it to 0.4 because in physically based shaders, 0.4 is a very normal roughness to use. We set the diffuse color, and this set's actually this right here, the color preset. You can see I just put it to pure red. Here's the color preset. I also has a check mark that turns it on, and this right here is set custom color true. So we're using a custom color and not the default gray. Then I'm going to change the name to test. You can see that here, test. And I'm changing the label to test also. You can see here it says test also, and over here it says test also. And now I'm going to create a second color. We'll call it yellow. And it's created exactly the same way, so I won't go over all that again. Here I'm going to print the directory of diffuse, and what that does is gives you all of the commands that can be used with the diffuse function, or with the diffuse library function. Then we're going to do a for loop. So we're going to have a variable called b, and it's going to iterate through the range from 10 to 180 at 20s. We're doing this because a circle has 360 degrees, but we're going from the top to the bottom, so that's half of a circle, is 180 degrees. And I don't want every single point, although I could. I'll change this to 10. And so that'll give us a lot more, oops, use my mouse to point instead of my finger, that'll give us a lot more balls in the circle. And we're going to put B radians, and radians here is going to convert from degrees. We have 360 degrees in a circle to radians. You have 2 pi radians, 3.14 radians in a circle. It's just another way to chop up a circle. But most of us are more used to having 360 degrees. Now we're going to do another loop within this loop. And this one's going to be called A, and again, I'll change this to 30 instead of 60, so we'll have a lot more spheres. And again, we're changing it to radians. I could do all the radian changing in these locations, but then it's within the middle of the loop, which means it's getting executed over and over and over, and it's silly to convert and convert and convert, because it's always the same number. So we take those things out of the loops. Anything that's repetitive that we can take out of the loops, we take out, because then it'll run faster. So this little piece here is calculating where the spheres will be placed, the UV spheres on the gross megasphere here. Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. This is the call to the Blender Python that creates a primitive UV sphere. And you can see here the segments, the rings, the size, the location, just like you would do it if you were actually going to click on the viewport and click A to add a sphere yourself manually. You can also include a lot of other things like the rotation or the layer that you're going to put it on. You can look that up online. Just Google the command and you'll find more information about what you can include. Okay, here we have an if statement like we talked about, and the input for the first part of the if statement here is a call to uniform. And uniform is going to return a number between 0 and 2 randomly. If that number is greater than 1, it will execute this code here. Else, in other words, if it's smaller than 1, it'll do the second code here. And this one is just using giving our object the material. This one's giving material 2. Yeah? And another thing to note is that we set up 2 different viewport colors. We have green, and we also have the red. But above here, we also have the cycles colors, which you can see are yellow and blue. If I switch this, again using the Py menus, to render, you can see that it uses the cycle colors and not the viewport colors. So I'm now going to press B in the viewport here and select all of these spheres, X, to delete all the spheres. And although you can see it doesn't automatically redo it because it's done in Python, it doesn't know that we did anything. If you move it, you can see all the spheres are gone. Okay, so that's the entire program. And I'm now going to press Alt-P with the mouse cursor in the text area, and that will run the program. And you can see it just created a whole lot of spheres, and Cycles has rendered them nicely. The background is once again an HDR image from the same website I mentioned in the previous video. So that's it for me. Do you have any questions? Anything that's not clear?
No, it looks good. It's quite structured and clear. Okay,
good. Thanks everybody for listening to our video, and if you have any questions or anything is unclear to you, please write a message, and you can either go to our forum on blendergamemaster.com, or you can write your question in YouTube and I'll answer it as soon as I can. Please also like and subscribe and all the normal YouTube and Facebook things. I have a Facebook page, we have a Google Plus page, the website, and YouTube. Thanks and have a good day.